Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Fully Human Connections podcast. I'm your host, King, and I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie.
How are you, Ken? Good to see you as always.
Same here, same here. Our second show of the year. Feeling great about it. And speaking of that, I'll just go ahead and ask you, what's your spiritual energy number?
Yeah, I'm working at a 10, and I have to admit that I had to choose that this morning because I'm very much saddened by, most of the things going on in the greater United States and on the planet, um, and by some people's responses to other people's suffering. So that kind of brings me down a bit, and but I'm here choosing to bring my best fully human self with 10 spiritual energy to this conversation.
Yeah, I understand exactly where you're coming from. Now more than ever, we need to be more fully human, and circumstances and people could test you to make sure if you really want to stay on that path, or you want to choose what seems at the time based on emotion, the easier path of, hate or, revenge or just anger. And then you realize after that fleeting moment has passed, just the joy of choosing to be fully human and what that really does for you long term. I mean, we can think back, all of us, I'm sure, at times when we let our emotion and anger go too far and we were forced to regret it. And depending on certain limits, some people are in prison or dead as a result of letting it go too far. But one other thing I wanted to add before I add my spiritual energy number to it was that, today's where we are in society around the world, just looking at the wars that's going on, obviously now the fires in California, the floods that was in New Orleans, we just seeing all these disasters. And really just sickening how, like, to me, the far right just don't know when to say, okay, read the room. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's just not proven to be politically uh, advocating or politically posturing at certain times. It's like, and that used to be the way of our country. We would be able to get along at certain times. Like we saw the Jimmy Carter's funeral. We talked about that last time. We saw well, we didn't talk about the funeral. We talked about his death. And we think the funeral has since been happened and been aired on TV. And then you saw the presidents there. And previous times, all the presidents would go out to their political parties, would be there talking. And, you would see it as a time of unity. And that's where people always put the circumstances or the situation above their uh, party politics. And those days are gone now. It's like, I don't care what the situation is, I'm going to double down. At least that's where it comes from the far right. They seem to be advocating for that no matter what, regardless of the situation, regardless who it hurts, who it impacts, who it affects. I'm going to just continue to stay on my agenda, because, but anyway, long story short, I said all that to say is I'm with you. I'm a 10. And despite everything else I said, that's the joy of choosing to be a 10 despite all that noise that's happening around us.
Yeah.
And so what are you grateful for?
Yeah, so I'm grateful to be sitting in a warm room looking at blue skies and air that's about 20 degrees before the wind and about 14 or 13 degrees with the wind blowing. But I'm safe. I'm relatively comfortable. I have indoor plumbing. I have food in a refrigerator and electricity that's keeping it cold. I can heat things up if I want, when I want. But I'm basically saying is my basic needs are taken care of. And I've earned those things. I've worked and have a little bit of money so I can pay for those things. But that's great good fortune on this planet in 2025 to be able to say what I just said. Here in the U.S., a majority of people can say what I just said. But we have 330 million people, plus, and there are 8 billion on the planet. More than half of them can't say what I just said. So I'm just really grateful for my good fortune to be relatively healthy, both mind, body, and I'll even add spirit there as well, as far as I can tell. I trust that my friends like you will tell me if I don't seem that healthy. Well, I think I am. You'll point it out to me. But I'm just grateful for these basic things, to have some friends, be able to do work I care about, be in conversation with you once a week, and to have the freedom to express myself and not worry about the government shutting me up or shutting me down so far.
You have no intention of going to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring? Or?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
You have no intention of going to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring or bend the knee?
No. Well, based on what I understand about adult development, history, and the meaning behind bending the knee and kissing the ring, if anything, if he really cared about the state of the world and the nation, Donald Trump should come to where I'm sitting and kiss my ring, maybe kiss my ass, and bend his knee. Yeah.
Well, I concur with you for being grateful as far as for my life. First of all, my life mother, I'm still around and feeling her love, energy. Grateful for another 24 hours to pursue my purpose. I'm grateful for the things I've been learning. As I get to grow. I'm grateful for having a roof over my head, the ability to see, hear, walk, talk, and breathe. Sound mind. Another 24. I'll learn. I'm grateful for that and the ability to continue to learn in various different ways. But I'm also grateful for the roof over my head, food, and the people who, like yourself, who I consider, friends, even though that list is getting shorter nowadays, just because of growth of my heart, and I would say, and just what I consider to be freeze and energy levels. I realize the more in tune you become with the energy of love, the more sensitive you are to frequencies and people's energies, and you just feel a person's energy like dogs, in the term of this person's not somebody I want to deal with. It's not a judgment, it's just a fact of I don't want to just whether not deal with a person and bring them into my inner space, into my life, and able to discern that as I've gotten older. That awareness is definitely something that helps. And I'm grateful for that. So that's my gratitude.
Yeah. And just, I really appreciate that. And just want to say there are moments when your audio is kind of breaking up a bit. Like I can hear everything you're saying, but it's coming in and out a little bit.
Okay, let me try audio settings. So while I try my audio settings, why don't you walk us into what our topic's going to be?
Yeah, so that's a good idea. So today we're going to, as always, we're speaking in the context of my 2022 book, Healing America's Narratives. And today we specifically want to address the problem of dehumanizing people we perceive as different, as our opponents in some way, shape, or form, whether they're corporate opponents for the marketplace or political opponents, and the dangers that take place in dehumanization. So just a couple of examples historically. The Europeans, going back 500 plus years, very successfully dehumanized the native peoples of Africa and enslaved them, and the native people of the Americas. In the middle of the 20th century, Hitler dehumanized the Jewish people. Didn't just criticize them, but presented them as being less than human beings. During World War II, here in the United States federal government and many citizens dehumanized the Japanese who had attacked us based on how they depicted them in cartoons, the words they used to describe them, and even in terms of imprisoning Japanese Americans on the West Coast who they didn't trust anymore. In the post Civil War, 19th and 20th centuries, or actually 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, the whites, especially in the Confederate States, but not only there, continue to dehumanize the descendants of those Africans who are now African Americans, blacks, through black code laws, Jim Crow, and lynchings. Post 9/11, Americans dehumanized almost anyone who looked like a Middle Eastern person, because it was in fact Saudis, I think Yemenis, and Lebanese men who had committed the act of terror on September 11th. Americans dehumanized Asian-looking Americans during COVID. So this is not a new thing. And it's one thing to have fear and to protest against an act by a small number of people. It's another thing to dehumanize those people or anyone who looks like them. Currently, the far right, what we're going to refer to now as Trump Republicans or MAGA Republicans, led by the president-elect, are dehumanizing people they consider to be progressive or liberals or Democrats, or infected by what they call the woke mind virus. And so when we have examples such as the horrific fires in the greater Los Angeles area now, where thousands of homes have been destroyed, thousands of livelihoods have been destroyed. Fortunately, because of evacuation and the work of law enforcement and firefighters and the government in California, there are only tens of deaths so far. I forget the exact number. I don't think it's above 40 yet, which in terms of the devastation, that's a low number. It's still a tragedy. But Donald Trump and some of the members of Congress, the Republicans in Congress, not all of them, are dehumanizing the people who are suffering there by criticizing their policies and blaming them for the fires. And to do that is in abject ignorance of climate change and global warming and all of the conditions that are leading to the floods that devastated North Carolina, the hurricanes that have devastated Florida, Louisiana, and other states, and fires that have devastated parts of Canada and other parts of the world, including Australia. Just ignorance of climate and global warming. And the problem with this dehumanization is that when bad things happen to these people who have been dehumanized, we either think it's okay or we just mock them. We don't try to help them. And we even are willing to perpetuate additional violence against them. A specific example from my time, I'm a native Yonkers person. I grew up in New York, in Yonkers, spent 40 years of my life there. And Donald Trump, when there was a horrific attack on a female, a white jogger in Central Park, 5 African-American Latino young men were accused of the crime, arrested, and convicted. And Donald Trump, called them animals and ended up they didn't do the crime. He took out ads in the New York Times and other newspapers to criticize these men. Even after they were exonerated, he continued to call them animals. He refers to non-white criminals in this country, non-white immigrants coming into this country, and terrorists who come from non-white countries as animals. He continually used that language. He refers to them as vermin. To quote him, we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country and that lie and steal and cheat on elections. So that's him projecting onto other people cheating on elections. And he just continually says, you wouldn't believe how bad these people are. They aren't people, they're animals. Yet when a white supremacist ran over a civil rights activist named Heather Heyer in Charlottesville back in I forget the year now, it's 2018, I think. Don't quote me on the year. He said the driver of the car was a disgrace to himself, his family, and this country, but he never called him an animal. He was white. So this language, which continues, right up to this week, is extraordinarily dangerous, especially because these people, these MAGA Trump Republicans, have control of the White House, the United States Congress, and the United States, well, both houses of the United States Congress. Last point I'll make, in fairness, governors and members of Congress in the states like North Carolina and other states who received immediate FEMA aid after the hurricanes and floods earlier this year, they have said it's disgraceful to try to put conditions on helping the people in California. So there are some moderately adult-like, developmentally mature Republicans in Congress and in state houses who have said Donald Trump and Mike Johnson and some of these other people are wrong and disgraceful for trying to put conditions on helping natural disaster victims, because we don't do that in this country. I mean, everybody sent help on September 12th, 13th, and 14th, 2001. Everybody responded to Hurricane Sandy and to Hurricane Ian and to Ian and to Hurricane, all of them. But now with these new people coming into power, there's this really dangerous conditional support for people who are suffering. And when anybody constantly dehumanizes a group, in this case, people whose politics and worldviews are more progressive and liberal than the people in power, that gets very, very, very dangerous, as we saw with what happened to Native Americans, African Americans, the Jews, post 9/11, people who looked Middle Eastern, and Asian-looking folks during COVID. So it's a real dangerous type of behavior that the incoming administration, who will take office on Monday, is practicing, and they seem to be enjoying it. That's the most scary part. So that could be my most long-winded introduction, but it's very dangerous. And the country could very easily continue to move in that autocratic us versus them way, where the us is the people in power and the them is everybody else in the nation. And there's no guarantee that any democracy, including American democracy, will continue to flourish. It's not a guarantee. So we have some things to be concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I find it to be so long about what you just laid out is that's what the fight has realized an effective strategy, dehumanizing, your political rivalries, opponents, seeing them as rivalries of opponents, and dehumanize them in order to achieve your goals, and that keeps you reelected, that keeps you in power, that you eat into that small percentage of your electorate that hates and that elected you based off of fear, hatred. And those are people who are active, that you're speaking to what they fear. And then again, we know that politics, most people, the kind of person does not get what they elected their elected official for on each side. Most of the ones who, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, if you have money, you're gonna pretty much what you selected or donated or to the candidate, what you've given to the candidate, you're gonna pretty much get you want for the most part. But the common person doesn't. We just have to settle. We have to compromise. We have to accept those type of things as far as when we elect our elected officials. And the sad part is again, no one's looking at what's the future ramifications of this behavior when it comes to dehumanizing. We're all Americans saying that, these Americans over here are, and saying the worst things about them. They're child pedophiles. They practice, child slavery, those things. And it's without any proof, just wild internet accusations, and maybe a few incidents where somebody may have done things and happen to be of a political party, but it does not mean that political party reports that or condones that. I mean, advocate that. I mean, so that's the part that I think we're losing our humanity in today's society. Humanity is no longer important. What's important is being seen. What's important is being heard, regardless of whether you have something to say or whether it's truthful or not. I'm shouting, listen to me. And you can shout the loudest. You got the most money. You're gonna get the most attention. And that's where I would say being human is being left out, because if you're human, you're going to be a critical thinker, and you're going to ask, okay, it is like if you walk out your door right now and you hear someone, I know you live down, you have a house with a long driveway, but you can get down your driveway where people are normal at the block, where they may be, and there's someone out there shouting, fire is a bad time, but just shout some insane statement. He might get your attention for a minute. You look at him, make your evaluation of the warrant attention, or just making noise. And then once you make determination, you put that to your thoughts, you're going to move on. And he may, at the worst, just be some by the way conversation I have with friends, colleagues. But see, now most people don't know how to have that discernment. They're not critical thinking, so they'll that person and they'll listen to what he's shouting, and they actually believe he's shouting, regardless of wherever it may be, and then go over and converse with this person and feed off the energy that he's given, and that's where we are. That's a simplistic way of saying that's how people are saying, well, if it achieves my goal, I'm going to dehumanize you. And one of the things that to me is a short contrast is we watch football. Football season, obviously, with the end of it, we're in the playoffs. And I just pay attention to the reason why I football because the Ravens winning. And the Ravens are good. So they're getting more of my attention, of course. And I'm watching and listening to more post games things and tend to do that. I'm that kind of man. I'm not going to just finally follow a team if they're 2 wins a season. But if you're winning most of the time and put out a good product in an organization like the Ravens are, believe professionally managed, it's a big organization, I'm going to pinch it. So I wanted to say, listening to the coaches talk pre-game about the other coaches and the players talk about each other, no one says anything negative about the other person. It's always respectful things. Here's what this team does well. Here's what we got to be mindful of, And they say that, and it's such. I'm so attuned to that now because I'm not seeing it anywhere else. That's the only time I'm seeing that right now. When people have opponents of giving them praise and respecting the opponent, and and just really having that kind of respect and reverence. So that's just that's what I wish we can get back to. I just close on this point that I don't know. I believe that unfortunately, what's going to take us to get to that is be some catastrophic event. It's not just pivot because people something happened and a lot of people going to get hurt in order for us to say, oh, okay, we're going the wrong road now. So let's stop this because I don't want any more people hurt. Like COVID. Everybody had the post-COVID perspective now that it's over, it's dealt with. Now we can all talk about what we shouldn't have done and we shouldn't have had to do this. It was stupid and all that. But at the beginning of it, at the height of it, You didn't know what to expect. Yeah, you putting on masks. You stand inside the house. You had no problem with it. Going to work. Those without the, people were dying. Seeing pictures of, at the hospital, they had truckloads of bodies. I don't want that. And everybody was clear on that. Then after, getting people, to pass, and people realizing you pray that it is not serious and God stops it. And then when it's not serious and God stops it, then you come about what you had to do with it through it. So that's the final point I want to say is I'm afraid that that's what take to get people on a better level and looking to be loved as opposed to relishing in the hate.
Yeah. Just a quick note too, that your voice is, I can still get it, but there's still a little bit of feedback coming through when you talk. I mean, again, I can get what you're saying, but it's not 100% clear. So I don't know. I'll speak for a little bit here and see if maybe that can get remedied. So I agree with what you just said about a catastrophe, maybe to get our attention. But what scares me about that prospect, this is what differentiates us, especially from Europe. So Europeans lived through 2 world wars where their cities, their countries were devastated. Right? The people in Japan lived through the firebombing. They attacked us in World War II, and I get that. But they lived through the firebombing of Tokyo, which burned most of Tokyo, and then the atomic bombs detonated above Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Other than September 11th, and not to minimize that event, our suffering, the catastrophes in this country are either natural or self-inflicted. We have September 11th, which was an attack. We have the Oklahoma City bombing, which was internal, an Army veteran did that. Then we have hurricanes and fires and tornadoes and floods. We've had a number of horrific catastrophes. Granted, they were local. I mean, even as big as the fires are in California, it's still a local event there. The hurricanes are local. They hit many states, but they're local. So even COVID didn't hit some places as much as it did other places. What is it going to take? What's the level of catastrophe we need? So that's the point that I want to make.
Well, I agree with you there as well. Is it any better now? Can you hear me any better now?
Keep talking.
So, to your point, I just think that most people are in the position where they're choosing the easier path. It's like, they're no longer seeking self-mastery anymore. They're not looking at how I can grow and be a better person. It's not people's doubting thoughts. And I believe that it's not because what they're feeding their minds. And since I'm having audio challenges, I'm going to step out for a minute and come back in and let you go ahead and continue the show. So listening audience, I'll have some technical issues. Be right with you all.
Okay, so as King was saying, he's going to disappear. Maybe not disappear, but he's going to do some work on his end technically, and we're going to continue speaking about this idea of dehumanization. I'm not a biblical scholar. From a biblical perspective, there's a passage in the second creation story in Genesis, which basically, according to the belief, God gives humans, whom he has just created, dominion over all of the flora and fauna, the animals and the plants and the trees, and says, these are yours, go forth and prosper, use them as you see fit. So what modernity has given us, the modern era, and we can debate when that really began. Some people put it back in terms of the European Enlightenment. Some people say it's the Industrial Revolution. Pick any one of those. I won't debate when modernity began. But what we've basically done as the dominant species on the planet is we've recognized what's human and what's not. And we've used up those things that are not human. So we've deforested millions and millions and millions of acres of forests around the world so we can have nice wooden things. We've dug into the planet and taken its resources in terms of everything from oil to gold to silver to copper to lithium to many others. When we build our homes and our stores and our malls and our corporate places and our amusement parks, we dislocate other living beings, mammals, reptiles, birds, insects. We've extincted, I don't know how many species. I'm pretty sure it's in the millions. And we do that for two reasons. There might be more than two, but one is to make ourselves more comfortable, to improve our sense of life. And those who are good at building the things that make us more comfortable do it so they can have lots of money, which is an exchange token that gives them access to many other things that they want. And so what if you look at the current state of what we're referring to as the Trump Republicans or the MAGA Republicans, none of them who are being recruited to be in this new administration are poor people, right? The very poorest among them are members of Congress who make $174,000 a year. Takes me, it's embarrassing how long it takes me to make $174K, but it's a few years. Because I was a Catholic school educator and a teaching poet, and I spend more time writing than trying to make lots of money. And I spend more time coaching and teaching. So there are no poor people who are calling the shots. And in fact, Donald Trump and others like him speak in dehumanizing terms about the poor. So what happens now is we treated those things who, that's a bad choice of words, those beings who are in fact are not human according to our language, trees, deer, bear, whales, earthworms, cows, dogs, except those that we domesticate. We treat them poorly so we can live more comfortably and make more money and have more things. And now we treat other human beings who we think are inferior the same way. We begin to dehumanize them so that they, in fact, are treated in ways that are as bad as, if not worse than, the way we treat mammals and reptiles and the planet itself. This ongoing dehumanization of other human beings can lead to nothing good. And that's what we're talking about here. And it's not both sides doing it. All right. Find me examples of members of the US Congress, of Democratic presidents who refer to their political opponents as vermin, as animals, as less than human. Find me examples of that. Trump and his followers do that. It's a dangerous precedent, as we said at the top of this podcast. If you think back to how the Europeans dealt with the indigenous peoples of the African and American continents, how Hitler spoke of the Jews, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to list all of them again. That's happening again. And everyone should pay attention. King, welcome back.
Well, welcome to be back. I want to see if it's my audio better now.
So right now, that sentence was perfect. Yes.
All right, great. So, yeah, you were laying out again how history has shown us where through white supremacy, dehumanization was necessary tactic to implement the model, to really instill the system in place. And now the system is even in place, you know, so folks don't realize how psychologically enslaved they are. You know, I give you an example. I saw someone on Facebook the other day, and I've known this, but this brought it to first back to my mind. Was this? It was a video of an African person talking about how poor countries in Africa are suffering, and how they actually may be making a product. And they use Versace for example. So we can make a Versace bag here. We sew it. We put together. And if an African put their name on it and give it an African name, then people will look at and say we're going to charge X $5,000, or let's just say $5,000 for this handbag. People will laugh at that and say, "Well, what's the purpose?" Especially, I'm talking about the African people themselves will laugh at that and say, "How dare they charge $10,000 for that?" But then it could be the same material, same process, production method, and just change it to a French name, having a French verb to it, and giving a same logo, and then the African people buy that and say it's worth $10,000, or 5,000, and go into debt to buy it, and then value better people, value people who have that for more, and people who have it have those persons will look down on other people. And that's because people have been psychologically enslaved, and that's how clear it is. And that's where I think that most Americans are now. They don't realize that. They enslaved in various ways. If you are leading with hate in your thoughts toward a specific group of people, not a person, but a group of people, you want to categorize them all together and say, all these people are bad, or all these people are this, and I hate these people because of that. If that's how you're thinking, you're enslaved. You're enslaved to a psychological belief that someone else is controlling you, because they can control anyone who's saying that and willing to put that out there, particularly nowadays on the internet, through videos. People who have an agenda will grab that and pull on that and use you for their agenda. You don't even realize you're enslaved to those trappings, because you don't see that when it comes down to it, there is no bad group of people. There's bad individuals in a particular group of people. Like I said, there's white people who are bad within the right race, but not the entire white race is bad. Same thing with the black race. Same thing with Jewish people, if you want to look at ethnicity. Same thing with Muslims. There is no all people of this particular ethnicity, color, race, gender, sexual orientation are bad. There's bad people in that. And that's where, if you see yourself as a human and you identify as a human, then you see the humanity in others. That's what I've learned. Speaking from my personal experience, the more I put myself on that path, the more I become growth minded, the more I work to live towards core principles and operate that govern my behaviors, then the more I see humanity in others, the more I see understanding in others, the more love I have for others, the more forgiveness I'm willing to do for somebody who I feel wrongs me. So that's where I believe that's the path we need to be seeking. Now, my question for you is, what do you see as some of those suggestions? I know this is something we normally talk later in the show, but for my own curiosity, I'm asking because I know you and your partner Ken have your fully human organization, and you do coaching and leadership around being fully human. And how do people navigate to that path when the noise out there is the first thing they hear, and it's so much easier to stay in the space of the noise?
Yeah, and I'm gonna give the bad news first, and then I'll give what I think might be better news. So, for all the people that I learned from, the scholars, the researchers, the the activists, those who have really done good work in the world. When I say good work, I define that as work that expands the conversation, that includes more people, is more comprehensive, is more fair, just, wise, and compassionate. That's good work. If you're limiting, if you're doing damage, that's not good work. So that's what I mean when I say doing good work in the world. No one that I've come across yet can give the answer to this question. Why is it that some people continue to grow into increasingly comprehensive, balanced, inclusive, good, loving worldviews, and others don't? Even people in the same household with the same parents. No one can give a general answer to why this person develops in a more loving way and why that person does not. So that's the bad news piece. There's not a formula for that. You know, we can look at great stories where somebody went through great, horrific trauma as a young person, worked through that with the help of others who loved this person, and developmentally grew into doing great work in the world. We can look at other people who had trauma when they were young, who grow up to traumatize others, to continue to perpetuate trauma. So there's not this formula we can plug into. But among the traits that I've seen, that I've experienced myself, that I've heard other people speak about, I hesitate to say, you know, if I could only pick one trait, this would be it. So I'm not going to do that. But among the most important traits are genuine curiosity. Now, when I say genuine curiosity, I mean an openness to not knowing. To be able to say to myself, it's a big world. There's a lot of stuff going on. I don't really know anything. Yeah, I know some things reasonably well, but I don't really know. So I'm open to learning. And the most important place for me to be open to learning, to begin with, is to learn about myself. Because if I can't see my own mind's working and my own heart working, my own gut response, if I'm oblivious, if I'm unaware of myself and my views and biases and what we use the phrase cultural givens, when just what you were referring to earlier, where you're just, part of what, you're being fed all this and you're just accepting it. If I'm not aware of what I really believe and the extent to which I'm just repeating what the culture gives me, I can't tell what's mine and what's the culture's. I can't tell. So to remain curious and open to learning more about myself, really important. To be self-reflective, to challenge the worldview that I was given as a kid and the worldviews that others continue to try to give me. I mean, I listen to some of the people who are nominated for positions in this new administration. I listen to what they say out loud in public, and I feel bad for them. I'm enraged in moments, but I feel bad for them. And here's why. And I'm going to come back to your question in a second, because I really don't know with any given individual, including Donald Trump, if what he says out of ignorance, because there are certainly things that he's ignorant about. Weather patterns, the science behind epidemics and pandemics, the United States Constitution, history in general. He's amazingly ignorant about those things, but he still has a lot to say about them. So I don't know if he's just completely ignorant or if he knows he doesn't know. And it's really arrogance that we're seeing. I don't know the answer to that. I'm really curious about it, though. I listen to what he says, and I don't know if it's just pure ignorance, if it's the awareness that he's full of shit, that he knows he's full of shit, but he's going to just be arrogant about it. That's how Roy Cohn taught him. He said, when you get in trouble publicly, you lie about it, you repeat the lie, you never admit that you were lying. That's the lessons he learned from Roy Cohn. So going back to the question, so remain curious, remain open, question what people give you. Sometimes they're going to give you the truth. Sometimes they're going to give you lies. Question what your monkey mind gives you. When your mind just goes and goes and goes and goes, and you start getting caught up in it. I'll give you an example of that. Yesterday, and this is me questioning myself. Yesterday, I got very, very upset and deeply saddened by what some of these Republican people in Congress were saying about providing aid to the folks in California. Right? I have a book called Enough with the Talking Points, Doing More Good Than Harm in Conversation, which came out before Healing America's Narratives. And so I've written about and I've taught about how to do good things in difficult conversations. But yesterday, my mind on its own began to try to convince me that my next Substack article, my next Substack recording of my article, I wanted to just warn people that I was going to rant. I was going to write a rant. I was going to be profane. I was going to be insulting. I was going to use sweeping generalizations. And I was going to attack the people who were saying all these horrible things. And I'm pretty good with profanity. I mean, I have no problem with it. I know how to use it. I used it as a young, ignorant man. And I was convinced that I was going to do this. I was going to publish it next week. And then, I'm not completely stupid. As the day went on, I just had questions. All right. As much as that would be satisfying in the moment, it would do no good. Even if I said to people who read my stuff, you might not want to read this at the beginning, warn them what I was about to do. That's not a good use of my time. So that was me reflecting on myself. Imagine if Donald Trump reflected before he said things out loud. I'm not saying he should be more like me, but he should be self-reflective. He should be honest. So open yourself, become curious, interrogate your thoughts, and interrogate what other people give you. Those are probably the two most important things. And then I would say err on the side of compassion and love, and not on the side of insult and hatred. I mean, that sounds like that I have to say that in 2025 to adults is part of the terror of all this. But I think it's really important. Stay open, be curious, interrogate whatever comes across your through your senses, what you hear, think, smell, taste, whatever sense I just left out. I know I always hit 4 of them. I left out one of them. See what you see. Interrogate it all, because with AI now, there's deep fakes of even photographs and videos. You've got to be aware and open and question everything.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Now, I want to kind of take a step back for a moment, and you mentioned your book, and I want to put some questions around that. In this context. So I'm just curious. Number one is, when did you write that book?
The book, it was published in 2018, so I wrote it between 2016 and 2018, approximately. It was the product of, I wrote 16 essays on doing more good than harm in conversation. And it was in a direct response to Donald Trump's presidency, his candidacy and presidency, because people started hating each other on social media, and he was hating people out loud. So it was my essays were in direct response to that. I realized I had enough raw material for a short book, so the book came out in 2018.
All right, and you kind of answered my next question in that answer, which is, what made you want to write that book?
Yeah, it was just seeing the deterioration of public and private discourse. I mean, it's the thing that still exists now, where people don't know how to disagree anymore. You want to know how to disagree, listen to recordings of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia, 180 degrees opposed in terms of their views of the Constitution and rights for Americans. Bader Ginsburg being liberal, Scalia being conservative. They were great friends. All right, that's just one example. There are other examples that began to shift in the 80s, though, in this country. But people, I think part of it is people are, with technology now, people get lazy. They don't really think for themselves. As you were saying earlier, they just repeat what they're given without reflective thought or critical thinking. They only take in what confirms their pre-existing biases, confirmation bias. And it's kind of an intellectual, don't use that word. It's a mental laziness. Right? Intellectual, it sounds elitist. It's the same thing. What you're doing with your mind. It's a laziness there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you've sent this book to me, and I've read it, and I think it's definitely a great book. First of all, I think it's timely. Second of all, but the reason I want to ask these questions on the podcast specifically is because you talked about how you were going to write a blog that's going to let you vibrate at a lower energy level that the far right is basically vibrating at. You said, okay, I'm gonna vibrate there, and I'm gonna show them, because you allow your emotions, and see, that's what being human is, right? We have these thoughts, so we're not telling folks that if you put yourself on a path to become fully human, that you're gonna just always think great things and just always be in blissfulness and joy. We're saying that what it does is it governs how you respond. It gives you that measuring stick, as Stephen R. Covey talks about, that global positioning for true north. Like, having your principles and then having your core principles and to me, I want to combine that with your identity. That helps you decide, how do I respond in this particular situation? If this is my identity and these are my principles, how should I respond?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that as your true north basis to go to, then, as you said, you're going to go with your gut, and your gut is going to be pretty much determined by your cultural givens. That's pretty much what's going to tell you what your gut says.
Yeah.
My father in my neighborhood, this is how they would respond. These people who I read and look at, and you talk about that as well, the books you've read, the authors who've influenced you, the people you shared with me that I thought, which is, Robert Keegan, just great works of art for transformation, and that's I'm applying to my life. But again, I say all that to set the context is that, at what point were you when you decided that I'm not going to do it? I'm going to allow my better self, my true north, to guide me in how I respond?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know if I can give you a point, but I can describe the process over a period of time. And I don't know, I'm assuming everybody hears themselves. I don't know if everybody does, but over a period of time in my 20s and 30s, even probably into my early 40s, but definitely my 20s and 30s, I was arrogant. I thought I was smart. And so a couple of things I heard myself say to people. Here's one of them. I once, maybe more than once, and it's not funny. I mean, it's embarrassing to think back. Forget profanity, using bad words. But I've said to people, to a person, you're a miserable excuse for a human being. I mean, this is one-on-one yelling back, in an argument with someone. I've said, this one I kind of like because it was an attempt to be funny. I've said to somebody, you must have a great chiropractor. And they said, what do you mean? And I would say, because there's no way with your head as far up your ass as it seems to be, you could not have horrible back pain right now. So those are the type of things that my brain would give me. Now, I know now that, that's something like I can joke about, but that does no good. All right. Right. A stand-up comic should say that, that's what comedy can do. But in an argument with somebody else, I mean, what, so I would hear myself over time, and I would also begin to feel how it felt to be in a situation where I was responding in that way, and I didn't like the feeling. But it was a process for me. It didn't happen overnight. Part of it was what I studied and, doing a vision quest in 1998, beginning to study, to meditate and study Buddhism in the early 90s. And a lot of things I read well before that, back into reading Zen in the Automotive Cycle Maintenance in 1976, Scott Peck's The Road Less Traveled in 1978. Each one of them was taking a little chisel and chipping away at my worst self and getting down to the core of my best self. That's how I would describe the process. But it took a long time. It wasn't like one book or one moment. It was, a decade and a half or so.
No, I meant the moment you felt before you sent your message to your Discord server. Because you were talking about how you felt that this is what I'm going to write on my Discord server. So I'm just saying, at what point did you pivot back to say, I'm not going to write that?
So I gave you a long answer to the wrong question.
No, it was interesting though. It helped me get a little more clarity about you. I'm sure the listening audience appreciated it as well.
It was basically last night. I was watching a college basketball game. My alma mater is doing really well. I love the Big East basketball conference, and I'm a St. John's grad. And Rick Pitino is doing a great job. And to your point with the football coaches and players, same thing. These guys go to battle and they say nice things about each other. They respect each other. But I was watching the game last night, and I read during the timeouts. Like I turn the sound off and I'm reading stuff because I just hate commercials.
Right. You both.
And I was always sitting there. My energy was down. St. John's was down early. They ended up coming back and winning. And I was just, enjoying the game. And I just was relaxing more. And I realized that there's no way I was going to use my energy. The day and my relaxing towards the end of the day just allowed me to say, okay, that's stupid. I'm not going to do that. It's not who I want to be or how I want to be. So, but it just happened last night. I realized I wasn't going to do it at some point.
So it wasn't a conversation with Sherry or somebody else to kind of get you back as your own thoughts, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that, because I realize that's something else we need. That's why I say it's the importance of coaching in your life.
Yeah.
Because you need somebody to have that accountability partner.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is a sales pitch to anything, but, again, using the sports analogy, I think the main difference as it relates to football, particularly professional football, that talent is pretty much equally across the board for the most part. There are some bad teams that don't have good quarterbacks and all that, yes. But I would say out of 32 teams, you have about 15 teams, the ones that make the playoffs, that have great talent. They got good quarterbacks, they got good coaches, good systems. But what makes the difference that I've seen, like a Kansas City keep winning, is especially the way they went out this year, is good coaching. Because other teams have more talented players in certain positions. So if you don't have a coach, somebody to help guide you to go along with that energy that you're having, those, as you talk about the cultural givens that's in you, processing those thoughts that's in your head, you're not having someone to sound that off with it to help you see, is this choice you're making right now the best choice? Or is this your long-term goals? Did your past week's performance get you closer to those goals, right? That's what we need to have in our lives, period. That's just not a good idea. Like people say you should drink, 160 ounces of water a day or 64 ounces of water a day. All those things are the good tips. But this is something that's absolutely necessary, particularly right now, because if you don't have someone who, and it should be someone you're paying for, to be honest, I believe. And the reason I believe that is because it should be somebody who's trained to be unbiased. And a good friend is not going to be that sometimes. A good friend is going to look at things from your perspective, what's in your best interest, and give you answers based on that. If you ask them for relationship advice, or, if you tell someone I'm starting a new business, they may tell you that that's a bad idea, or why you're doing it at this particular time, because they're coming from an emotional context and putting things you said and things you did in the past. But you're dealing with a professional who understands how to ask that question and what the weight their answers have is a major difference. And that's what I believe that for me going forth, I need to have that in my life. And I know that's going to make a major difference. The people who choose not to have a coach, whether it's professionally or personally, I really know how you're going to make this year different than the previous years. You know, whether sticking to a I'm going to eat better goal, or I'm going to work out more better goal. I'm going to read more better goals, you know, or I'm going to be more financially prudent goals. If you don't have someone to kind of guide you and accountability, hold you accountable every week, and that's what I really wanted to wrap up. My point I'm making is that the coaching with the better teams are the ones that do a weekly assessment. Like one of I realized this how much I'm enjoying it when I'm watching football this year is I don't know if you had a chance, but watch games with Tom Brady as actually the commentator or the analyst of, and just his perspective when he says things. And you're hearing from a quarterback, unlike Troy Aikman, who's done a decent job as a commentator and analyst, but when Tom Brady is saying it, you're hearing it from a person who's won 7 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
And it's different, right? The way he processes and analyzes it. And like I watched this week in, Green Bay, and I watched again. I know he's his second year, but CJ Stroud, I'm forgetting the quarterback of Green Bay right now. If it's CJ mixing them up with the Texans. But anyway, my point is he was leading his receivers into positions. They just kept getting hurt. So they were just carrying people off the field as receive, and it's like a good quarterback knows not to throw that ball into that position. And Tom Brady would make those kind of statements without condescendingly saying that's because he's a rookie or he's a bad quarterback, but just make an observation. So I just wanted to bring that to my final head on that is just the importance of guidance and you writing the book that you've written. And I just think that needs to be added to some of the solutions. So as we bring our show to an end, we kind of gone over a little bit. Great discussion. Again, we just want to always end our show with some practical next steps that people can employ. You gave some great ones early in the show, but what else would you want to add to that? Some takeaways that people can take away from our show today.
So in addition to the curiosity and staying open and interrogating what comes in, which is what we said earlier, I would say take full responsibility for your life. You're not a victim. Now, some people are victims of horrible acts or natural disasters. You're a victim of a hurricane, you lose your house, or a fire, you lose your house. You're a victim of a crime. I don't mean that. But don't live your life at the effect of others. Right? Take responsibility for those things you have some control over and live that way. Because there are people out there who can help you, but ultimately it's your life. So as you said, a good coach, and even in my case, I mean, there's a small number of friends that I have who, we've known each other long enough where we know we can trust each other. And so we will say the hard things. We don't just say, you're okay, everything is fine when somebody, needs to be kicked in the ass. But find out who those people are, whether, again, as you said, a paid coach or a really good, honest friend or family member who you can say the hard things to and nobody's going to leave the room. But ultimately, you have to take responsibility for the life you choose to live. That's easier said than done for some people, because some people, we don't all get the same deck of cards.
Mm-hmm.
We're not dealt the same hand is probably what I was trying to say. You don't get the entire deck, you get a dealt a hand. But you still get to decide how you play the game.
Right.
To make choices wisely, with compassion for yourself and for others, and stay open and stay curious. I mean, it's general advice, but I think it's really important.
Absolutely. I think it's great advice. And I think that people need to hear that more so than ever. I mean, Trump's new presidency haven't even started. It starts today. He's going to get sworn in today, right?
No, Monday, the 20th.
The 20th. Okay.
Yeah.
So
don't rush it. Slow down.
So people are going to have to think about how they're going to move forth. I mean, we're already seeing billionaires just really cater to Trump. Mark Zuckerberg changes. And it's like, you're forced to kind of use these platforms to build your business and, build relationships with friends. And it's like I'm at a stage where I don't want to do anything that supports Elon Musk at all. I used to like Teslas. I would never buy a Tesla now. Not that it's going to have any financial impact on him at all, but just the principle of me saying, I'm not giving you any of my money, directly. Don't want to use Twitter anymore. Twitter is a great platform to do business, grow your business. A lot of people look to it for their news and information. But, I think that's where we really have to begin to look at as a society, start, of a conscious society who wants to be fully human and wants to end this pain and all this discord and all this hate and take that out of the normal, make that abnormal again, as opposed to making it normal where it is now. We got to make some sacrifices and say, if you're going to cow like that, Mark Zuckerberg, then we're not going to use Facebook. We're not going to use Twitter, and the money stops, revenue stops. And then they'll be forced to say, okay, now I got to, not do what's in my best interest, but really look at my clients and stakeholders and do what's in their best interest if I want my company to survive. So I just want to add a little bit on there. Now we're going to transition to our last part of our show, which is we both, lift up a person, whether it's past, meaning that someone is no longer with us, or someone currently we know who exhibits the behaviors of being fully human. And this time I'm going to throw you that mic first, Reggie, and let you name yours. I'm going first 5 last time.
Drat. No, so I actually have one ready. I mean, so I'm going to speak on behalf of Marianne Williamson, who, if you're of a certain age, you know of her from the 70s and 80s as a kind of a self-help guru preaching love and peace, and has run for president several times in the last few cycles. And she's now put her hat in the ring for the chair of the Democratic National Committee. And she brings a whole different energy and a real message of love and respect for other human beings to the conversation. Very different from what most of the other candidates for the chair of the DNC bring. And I don't know if she has any realistic shot at all. But she has this real moral courage. She's a learner. So she's, she's the person that wrote a beautiful passage that for some years was attributed to Nelson Mandela, because he used it. I forget which speech he made where he used it. And it basically says, what scares us is not how small we are, but what scares us most is how our greatness. The quote was used in a movie with Samuel L. Jackson, Coach Carter. It was used in that movie. Mm-hmm. But Marianne Williamson is one that actually wrote that in her book, A Return to Love. And Mandela, to his credit, basically said, no, I didn't write that. It was her. But she's just, she's got to be in her, I don't know if she's my age, a couple of years younger. She's in her late 60s, I guess, or around 70. But she's just keeps on going and finding ways to contribute. And she's got a beautiful message, but she's not some naive, just love and peace, man. She's not singing Kumbaya. I mean, she's taken on the Democrats at their leadership level, and she's learning how to do that. So I have a lot of respect for her. If Americans had any sense at all, they would have elected her. The Democrats would have elected her as a candidate, although she would have gotten crushed by the MAGA, right? But because they don't really believe in love and compassion for other human beings, but she does. So Marianne Williamson.
Yeah, great choice. And, I'm having to go look up some of those quotes and now watch Coach Carter with a different perspective. So thank you for sharing that. The person I'm going to lift up right now is still currently alive. And again, I want to preface this by saying that and I'm sure the same thing applies to you, Reggie, that when we're saying people, we're not saying that these people are flawless. There's not things they've done in their lives that we disagree with, and that they're perfect individuals. But we're saying that these these people exhibit fully human characteristics and behaviors as their default position. And they've shown growth. They've made mistakes and they've shown growth, which to me is the whole essence of being fully human. So with that being said, I'm going to lift up is Snoop Dogg. Mm-hmm. And my reasons for lifting up Snoop Dogg is I saw him recently on a Jimmy Kimmel interview, and he talked about some of the humanitarian efforts that he's doing with the wildfires. And he made a point, like Jimmy Kimmel talked about how, he has on his parking lot or outside his studio, he has created an area where folks can come donate water, blankets, food, anything where people who are looking for or need assistance can come get aid and assistance. And he showed on camera some of those things. And that's great. And I'm not knocking Jimmy Kimmel at all for that. That's admirable that he's doing that. And that's kind of why I like Jimmy Kimmel as well. But when Snoop Dogg was being interviewed and he asked Snoop Dogg some of the things he's doing, he made it a point to say, well, I'm lifting my platform and I'm pushing buttons, but more importantly, I have people out in the streets on the ground and they're going around to different people in our communities and they're asking, what do you need? Because these people are so much overlooked all the time. When we make just donations to different charities don't always go into certain neighborhoods and certain people don't always get the help they need. And I want to make sure that I have my troops on the ground getting the help they need. So I just thought that was insightful. And he understands that it's easy to sit and say, well, I made a donation to, Red Cross or to my local church or some nonprofit and into that fact to think that and that's admirable. I'm not judging anybody who that's what you've done at your contribution. But when you take it a step further, when you realize that I really want to make sure people get help, I don't want to just, donate and just leave it from my mind. I want to really be involved and really get ingrained. And so that was something that was fully human. Then he looked at the fact that he has a community and youth empowerment, which he does, and football, going back in the community and helping these young kids get a pathway to football and getting them away at an early age, ones who have the interest and the ability from what the streets would do to a lot of inner city youth who are looking for sports as a way out, and they're talented. How if they don't have the right people around them, they get consumed by their environment and they never make it out. Mm-hmm. So he's helped people make it to the league, and people like C.A. Stroud, which I mentioned earlier. For example, somebody that's going through his camp, and he does a lot of good work. But he's also done a lot of personal development. I mean, he was accused of murder, went through a trial, was he wasn't convicted, of that. And I only mention that to show his growth. That was a stain on him. So this is a kid that grew up 16 years old rapping gangster rap. And look at him right now. He's really a global humanitarian. I mean, he was featured prominently during the Olympics. And every time I look at him, he's on TV and some TV show, some commercial. Like, he's the most famous rapper out there. Not necessarily maybe the most talented, but he's definitely the most famous. He talked about how he met Paul McCartney, and Paul McCartney was familiar with his music, and he was excited to meet Snoop Dogg. His relationship with Martha Stewart. I mean, he moves in circles you don't recognize or most people would normally put him in. He's able to move in all those circles and still be him. He doesn't have to put on a suit in order to do that, cut his hair, stop his persona of, marijuana consumption, whether you agree with it or not. If you're going to have him in your world, then you recognize that you are accepting that part of him. And, that's not something that he's bringing with hate. So, yeah, Snoop Dogg is who I'm going to lift up right now for that.
Yeah, great choice. And I'll add one more bullet point for Snoop Dogg is like he sang along with Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson, and Merle Haggard on Willie's song, Roll Me Up and Smoke Me When I Die. You hear the four of them, man, that's the best thing ever. I mean, I don't know if it's the best thing ever, but it was really good.
Again, look at that circle there. Who would ever put, you saying three of those first names, you would never, I bet you can give people a million guesses. And nowadays they will say it, but prior, Snoop Dogg would never have been added to that fourth person that you could think about when you put the other three together, So thank you, listening audience. We've gone over a little bit, actually 15 minutes over. It's been a great discussion, obviously something we both very passionate about, and I believe our hearts and prayers go out definitely to all the people suffering around the world. But in particular, we want to lift up California, just because I couldn't imagine being told I can't go home or I can't go certain places because there's a fire, and then the possibility of having it burned down and losing everything other than what I have on me personally, regardless of where you are financially. That's devastating. So hearts and prayers, and I think support should definitely go out to those people dealing with that issue. And as we bring our show to the close, I want to thank everyone for listening. Again, Reggie, thank you again for putting together another wonderful topic, being present, being engaged, and helping me by being here. I'm learning, continue to learn from you. I'm grateful for that. And listening audience, grateful for you all listening, whether you listen to live or you listen to a replay of the show. Thank you. And until next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, let's all continue to work toward being more fully human. Thank you.